Rand, I need another episode of Fully Cinematic.
I already gave a rundown of Jack Reacher's first half-ass on-screen appearance, but that wasn't the end of his mediocre saga. And so I figured you come this far, you might as well go all the way. So here we go, back on the road with Jack Reacher Never Go Back. And oh yeah, there will be spoilers. We begin in the parking lot of a diner. A nosy-ass crowd is gathered, and four guys who clearly had the ever-loving beat out of them are lying on the ground. The law shows up and cuffed the lone guy sitting at the counter inside. It's Jack, of course, and he's responsible for the ass-beating victims outside. After being threatened with a lengthy prison stretch for aggravated assault, Reacher informs the sheriff, Raymond Wood, that he'll be the one going to the bang for trafficking the three undocumented women consoling each other in the booth nearby. Jack explains that because the kidnappings and associated crimes took place on land operated by the U.S. Army, his ass will momentarily be arrested by MPs under the command of Major Susan Turner of the 110th CID Military Police in Alexandria, Virginia. Sure enough, Sheriff Wood's wearing bracelets within minutes, and Reacher hitches a ride to a motel where he gives the aforementioned Major Turner a call. For those unfamiliar with the title character, he served as an MP in the Army himself for 20 years before leaving it all behind for a minimalist life of independence. And as it turns out, Major Turner now occupies his former job, and she's portrayed by Colby Smulders, who more or less just brought her Maria Hill portrayal over from the MCU. Reacher and Turner, a 10-year veteran, stay in touch, and eventually he asks her to dinner. She responds by criticizing him for taking so long to pop the question. All right, lady, relax. Who says you were even dating material for all this time? Get out of here. Anyway, she in turn invites him to D.C. where she lives. So Reacher, who doesn't own either a car or a license, promptly hops on a Greyhound and heads straight over to Susan's office when he arrives in town. But as luck would have it, some jackhole by the name of Colonel Sam Morgan sitting at her desk when Reacher opens the door. See, Turner's ass has been relieved of duty, arrested and charged with espionage. Though the Army's unsurprisingly tight-lipped about anything else involving the case, a friendly sergeant points Reacher toward the attorney assigned to Turner. When Reacher meets with the man in question, a Colonel Archibald Moorcroft, he notifies him that a Candace Dutton is seeking child support for her daughter with Reacher. The latter denies ever having fathered anyone and heads over to IHOP, but he does take the file photo of the little girl. After noticing that he's picked up a tail, Reacher gets a drop on the guy's car. It's two dickheads from a private military contract called Parasource and takes their handguns before leaving them with a warning. He later tracks down his daughter, Samantha, and loses sight of her before she gets to drop on him with the warning. Okay, Jack, get your head out of your ass. The next day, Colonel Moorcroft fills Reacher in on more details of the case. Namely, that Major Turner led an investigation in Afghanistan that ended with two sergeants under her command shot to death near Bagram Air Force Base, and Turner herself in her current predicament. That night, Moorcroft's tortured to death at his home by a guy with questions about his conversations with his new client. The following morning, the Captain Anthony Espin picks Reacher up at his motel and reminds him that he blocked his promotion when he served under him. After Espin brings him to Colonel Morgan, Reacher's questioned about his whereabouts the previous evening and charged with Moorcroft's murder. As a final personal FU, Morgan hits him with the old stop-loss trick, recalling Reacher to active duty and thereby placing him under military jurisdiction. Not long after he's taken to the stockade, Reacher incapacitates Espin and, using his ID, makes his way to Turner's cell just in time to save her from being murdered by the Parasource goons. The duo then BS's their way out of the Bing and steals an MP's car while bickering the entire time. After ditching the vehicle, Tom Cruise does his customary 40-yard dash with Smulders joining in. Turner reveals that Sergeants Sabelli and Merkovich were each found shot in the back of the head while investigating weapons that had gone missing during the troop drawdown in Afghanistan. When they pick up a tail, the same goon who killed Moorcroft, the duo hauls ass to a nearby restaurant where they ambush him, unsuccessfully. He beats it out of them, especially Turner, and I mean damn, and shoots it out of two civilian cops who intervene, allowing Reacher and Turner to make a getaway. The next morning, they break into Morgan's house and download Merkovich and Sabelli's files while Reacher puts the colonel in the painful arm lock. Realizing that the bad guys are aware that Reacher has a daughter, they haul ass to Samantha's place, where they find the corpses of her foster parents. Samantha, though, managed to hide, and the former MPs take her for breakfast in the minivan that they stole before dropping her off at Turner's old boarding school for safekeeping. Trigger Man subsequently murders his boss, Colonel Morgan, framing Reacher for the crime. While at Pembroke, Samantha steals the bag of a student who was nice to her, and because she uses a cell phone, which can be traced, the plan's aborted and all three hit the road again. Sergeant Friendly relays that Parasource is based in New Orleans, where Prudhomme, who worked with Sibeli and Merkovich, lives, which becomes their new destination. The credit cards that Samantha stole from a rich girl at Pembroke are enough to pay for plane tickets, but they pickpocket the IDs of lookalikes in order to get through security. Jack Reacher author Lee Child cameos as a TSA agent, by the way. During the flight, Reacher puts the smackdown on two more contractors and takes one guy's phone, which he uses to call the Trigger Man. The trio has to run when they hit the airport because more Parasource boys are waiting for them. But slipping onto a bus is apparently enough to shake these seasoned killers who left a trail of bodies all over DC. During the ride to a hotel, Reacher finally confesses to Samantha why he sought her out. She in turn makes a confession of her own, that the paternity suit was her idea. Later, Susan and Samantha have a pajama party while Reacher goes out to get them some fast food. After Samantha falls asleep, Reacher and Susan engage in what we're supposed to believe is flirtation, which quickly degenerates into hostility because Turner doesn't want to be left behind when Reacher goes to locate Prudhomme. Assuming that he's being racist, of course, she goes on a tirade about being patronized throughout her career. Reacher finds Prudhomme's wife first, who gives him a photo of her other half and reveals that he's a junkie before taking her baby to church. Reacher is subsequently cornered by four Parasource dudes who are watching Miss Prudhomme. Somehow, Reacher disarms and beats the brakes off of all four goons just in time for Trigger Man to show up and shoot it out with them. Meanwhile, Susan teaches Samantha a martial arts move back at the hotel. And when Reacher returns, she pouts and stomps around before unloading the chip on her shoulder on him again. The next morning, the odd couple wakes up to find Sam gone, which ignites their parenting instincts. She was out on a solo recon mission and soon returns with a possible location for Prudhomme. Sure enough, Reacher and Turner find Specialist Prudhomme at the crack house that Samantha scouted, and he divulges that he was paid to look the other way while working security at Bagram during the weapons thefts in Afghanistan. Afghani warlords attempted to renegotiate and attacked a military convoy when Parasource declined. As soon as he learned that Turner's colleagues had been bumped off, he went AWOL. Turner subsequently contacts Captain Espin to arrange his introduction to Prudhomme as well as a meet at the docks later that night. Meanwhile, Parasource, who's been listening in, sets up an ambush. A shootout ensues, leaving Prudhomme and the Parasource goon dead and Espin injured. Afterwards, Espin learns that Parasource began dealing weapons to insurgents because the company lost its government contracts. When Samantha calls room service, Parasource learns her location. The trio of MPs gets to the airport to confront Parasource, where they meet company head General James Harkness. After Turner makes a Columbo speech, Harkness proves her wrong and insists that she be arrested. But Reacher turns the tables again, demonstrating that the weapons in the crates being loaded are filled with opium. Back at the hotel, Samantha is chased down by Trigger Man. Pursuing her through the Halloween celebration on the street, Trigger Man corners Reacher Jr. on the roof of another hotel just in time for Pops to show up for an armed standoff. With the gun to her head, Jr. performs her new move when Reacher gives a signal, giving him just enough time to jump off the roof with Trigger Man onto the roof of another building below. After a fight, Reacher fulfills his promise to break Trigger's limbs and neck before tossing his ass onto the street. Jack and Susan say their chemistry-free goodbyes, and Samantha explains to Reacher that she realized that they're not actually related due to the fact that he failed to recognize her moms when she served him coffee. Pretty sneaky, Sam. They bid each other a tearful and actually moving goodbye before Reacher hits the road to hitch a ride and receives a text from Samantha, who snuck a phone into his pocket during a final hug. Never Go Back is based on author Lee Child's 2013 book of the same name, which is the 18th in the Jack Reacher series and is quite a prophetic title as the controversially cast Tom Cruise never returned to the role, and most of the audience for the first movie never opted to come back for this one. Which is ironic because the sequel may be a slightly better film. It's hard to say. It certainly lacks the cheesiness of its predecessor. Either way, as many streaming fans know, a television series hoping to win back fans of the books and with Lee Child's full support was launched in early 2022 with a new, much bigger actor in the title role who looks a lot closer to the swole 6'5" monster described in the novels. I've already reviewed the first two episodes. By the way, Cruz is a repeat offender when it comes to having no resemblance to his characters. The year after Never Go Back's theatrical debut, Tom starred in 2017's American Made as 1980s cocaine smuggler Barry Seal. While Seal did stand less than 6 feet tall, he weighed about 300 pounds. And not only did Cruz refrain from pulling a De Niro or Bale by picking out for the role, he also declined to wear a fat suit. But on the other hand, believe it or not, Tom's visual similarities to his Valkyrie role, the real-life Colonel Klaus Van Stauffenberg, are striking. But still, the only person I know who actually likes the Jack Reacher movies is this guy. In other news, it's time to highlight a few comments the viewers left on previous videos, and what comments are more appropriate than the ones given in response to my early review of the Reacher streaming series. Sabe Jr. said, I was a fan of Reacher, but the books are no longer the same quality. Endless descriptions and no moving fan of women without the sleeves romance or patriotic values. Also, the plot here in Sentinel is all Russia, 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 which is BS. China are the enemy, and I would have thought Mr. LC could have worked that out by now. No longer a fan. Sounds like I made the right decision in skipping those books, Sabe. Kanye Twitty said, it's not a bad series so far. It looked fairly decent for a show with what is obviously a very, very low budget. Lots of exteriors and alleys, car parks, generic outside spaces, and the interiors look kind of last minute thrown together. Character inconsistencies aren't unusual, especially in the first season, although some scenes and dialogue were just excruciatingly bad. For example, a scene at a roadhouse which exists for no other reason than to prove that Reacher can open a non-twist-off beer cap with his muscles, and Roscoe uses the edge of a table to open hers, except no bar is allowed to sell beer bottles with the lid still on them. And there are many more just like that, poorly written and meaningless to the plot. That said, there is good potential. There were some really well-done fight scenes, although they gave him very few moves and punches to work with. Lots of identical blocks and throws without much variance, suggesting for different attacks. And I enjoyed the payoff to the running gag about his peach pie. I'm loving how detailed your assessment is, KT. Keep the comments coming. And last but not least, John Jones said, I follow the books pretty well. Prison assholes are too freaking stupid to kill a character like Reacher, who is both high IQ and very skilled in killing people. All right. On that note, shout out to Sabe Jr., Conway Twitty, and John Jones. And shout out to everybody who hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But I've had enough of this conversation and I'm logging off.
Fully cinematic.